Hello. I was just going to give a bit of maintenance to my art collection. I've got the insurers coming around, just want to make sure that everything's covered. I'd be very concerned if there was some sort of theft and I wasn't insured for my art, especially when you can see it's such fine art done by some little known artists. Actually, the artists were little when they did it. It's some work done by my kids. But it does beg the question, what are crime rates like in Australia? We're talking about deviancy, so we have this notion of criminal deviancy, that there are people in our society who do not do what is expected or required or normal. And sometimes that results in criminal deviancy, something that has legal consequences, and specifically talking about legal consequences within our Australian framework. So today I just want to talk about the social construction of criminal deviancy, as well as look at the problem that we have with crime statistics. Now, what do I mean by crime statistics? Excuse me. We have statistics that are gathered from the police, the number of arrests that they make, the number of complaints that are made, lots of different things to do with the reporting of crime, the follow-up and the arrest and the legal implications. We also have statistics that come through our courts. Now think, we just don't have the local magistrate's office. We have different levels of courts within Australia. And it's even more complicated than that, because it's not just the different levels that we have, but we also have different jurisdictions. So in each state and territory, there are their own legal jurisdictions. In addition to that, we have federal government and federal courts. Excuse me. So we have a very complicated system for gathering our statistics. In addition, we can gather statistics from prisons. So that every year there are statistics gathered about how many persons are imprisoned within the Australian system, whether that's because of crimes that they have committed or whether they are on remand and waiting for their case to be heard, or whether they are being held, waiting for the planes to be right so that they can be deported away from Australia. So there where our statistics come from. Now, we also have to consider, how do those persons and those institutions gather their statistics? Well, they're also gathered as a result of people witnessing or being the victims of crime. And so being the witness or a victim of crime, you will go and report it in the expectation that there will be some sort of follow-up and some sort of recourse. But we also know that not everyone who is the victim of a crime will go and report it. And those statistics change. So just because we know that there is a crime doesn't mean that it has been reported. Therefore, we know that our statistics within Australia, our criminal and legal statistics, are underreported. So what we have as statistics come in at different levels from different sources, with the understanding that they are underreported. But what's the nature of the statistics? So we know where they come from, more or less. What are they like? Now, they're statistics. Scientific measures, we know that they must be objective. They've got numbers attached. They've got percentages. And if you want to go and play with stats programs, you can do all these marvelous things with numbers. Except the sociologist knows to go and ask the difficult questions. Are these really objective numbers that we can go and simply interrogate and draw our conclusions easily and directly? And the answer, of course, is no. The first thing we need to remember is that there is no inherent act that we could say is deviant. If we adopt the constructionist model, then the deviants are made by the attitudes and the actions of society at large. So the first problem we have about criminal statistics is that what we are calling, or who we are calling the criminal or the criminal deviant, is actually being called that and is being placed in our legal system because of what is happening in wider society. So that's the first thing and the primary thing that we need to remember when looking at crime statistics in Australia. There are different definitions for crimes given in different jurisdictions. So different definitions, and not only that, but the definitions change over time. So it's difficult to look at the definitions of a criminal act in the past and say, does it equate to the criminal act now? Because definitions change. Is what was called rape previously the same as what is now referred to as sexual assault? Or are there differences in the two that make it difficult for us to compare one act against another? We also have, as we said, different jurisdictions, therefore different definitions, and the definitions don't always match, as I've said. But also we have differences across time, across cultures, and the way in which the criminal act is interpreted will also be different. Now, they will be interpreted differently by the witnesses and by the victims, by the police, and if it's progressed further, they will be open to different interpretations within the courts as well. So our crime statistics are good and useful, and it's a good thing we have them. But we need to think very carefully about how we use them. And therein lies the problem with crime statistics. It's not simply that we may not be able to compare them easily, but it's also the case that there are problems with the way that they may be used. They can be used for political agendas, such that the policing or the government policy might be such that there is a particular focus on an area of crime. It might be on street gangs or on drug use or prostitution, in which case the numbers will be changed and they will be skewed because of the way that the policies are being directed towards that area of deviancy. But not only that, they can be manipulated such that something might be overrepresented or perhaps underrepresented within the data as well. So it's not a straightforward thing to say that we can use the stats even when we work out how the definitions might match up and how we can equate them to each other. We also have a significant issue in willingness to report. If you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics and go to the victimisation records, you'll discover that crimes are reported differently and with different frequencies. So we know that theft is reported at a much higher rate than sexual assault. And then we get to white collar and corporate crimes. And those are things, right, when they're discovered and when they happen, they can be splashed across the newspapers, make a great big name for themselves. But by and large, they're not reported very much at all. So there are different reporting rates that will also take place. So that's one of the problems we have too. How do we compare across the different types of criminal activity that's being recorded for us? As I've mentioned before, one of the issues about deciding what are the stats is that the definitions change. Again, we have a problem in deciding what is happening as far as crime goes because of the way that those definitions change as well. A final problem that I would also say that we have with our crime statistics is once we've worked out what they are and we've assured some sort of reliability and some sort of comparison between different statistics, how do we interpret them? There's been some work done. There was a book published earlier this year called The Vanishing Criminal. You'll see reference to it in the lecture notes that you'll find online. There were these different observations being made in Australia and also in other countries that suggested there was a decreasing rate of crime. But how is that to be interpreted? When the numbers were looked at, yes, it did seem that there was a decrease. But then how do we interpret them? Some of the there were 16 different interpretations that were looked at in this book. One of them, for example, was that that because lead was being taken out of the environment, so reduction in paints and especially in petrols, that maybe the children who were growing up now were less likely to have suffered cognitive impairment as a result of lead poisoning in the environment. Therefore, knowing that children growing up with cognitive impairment are more likely to be involved in crime and in deviant behaviours, maybe the environmental work being done on cleaning up the environment was making a difference to criminal statistics. Another one, quite a controversial one, was that the availability of abortion and the changes in abortion law meant that there were fewer unwanted children in the world. Again, drawing on the observations that children who grew up neglected were more prone to deviant and criminal behaviours as well. And as you can hear in that, a whole lot of other assumptions used to develop that sort of theory. So these and the other 14 theories were looked at, trying to work out what is going on here. We've got the statistics, here are some theories. What they actually found was at the start of the century, there was a big increase in the price of heroin. As well as the increase in the price of heroin, and probably because of it, there was also a decrease in the purity of heroin. Therefore, those who were using heroin started to move away from it, either trying to get off heroin, going into therapy, finding alternatives. So that seemed to be part of the reason that there was an observation in the reduction in crime statistics in Australia. The authors also looked at it a little bit more deeply, and they said, well, look, around the similar time, consumables, so consumer goods prices also started coming down, so that there were cheaper options for people to buy. Therefore, theft became less of an issue for people as well. So they were able to analyze the statistics that were there. They were able to look at the various interpretations that were being given and found that some were very, very problematic. But were able to bring it together to say, no, there is actually a reduction. And these are the observations that we can make that were taking place in society. And we believe that that is part of the reason that we see a reduction in crime. Now, that doesn't mean that all crime is being reduced, but there would seem to be less crime now than there was 20, 30 years ago. I hope you enjoy investigating these statistics. In the lecture notes, you will find there are some links to some articles that are very interesting to read. I encourage you to go and do that, and we will meet again another time. I might need to just go and cancel the insurance for my kids' artwork. I like it, but regardless, maybe it's not going to be stolen anyhow. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.